सत श्री अकाल एंड वेलकम टू CJ Sidhu show. जिस तरह तुहानू पता ही है कि every Thursday on my show I invite politicians or community activists. So ਅੱਜ ਆਪਣੇ show ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਦੋ MLAs ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਹਨ and I will briefly introduce them. I will start with Trevor Halford, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ recently elected as Surrey White Rock MLA in this 2020 elections, and Trevor is also the official opposition critique for mental health and addictions. Trevor's roots run deep in both White Rock and Surrey. He was born and raised in Surrey. He is a graduate of Elgin Park Secondary and Trinity Western University. His mom ran a small business for 30 years in the area, and Trevor and his wife run a wholly operated daycare out of their home. They have 3 kids, Ben 12, Nick 11, and Sasha 6. And they play in the same parks, fields, and rinks where he grew up and where he now volunteers as a coach. So Trevor understands the building of a strong and vibrant economy are fundamental for families, as he a fierce advocate for Surrey, White Rock, and Victoria. And Trevor looks forward to advocating on behalf of the constituents of Surrey White Rock. So welcome, Trevor. And the second person with me today is Stephanie Cadieux. I don't think she needs much introduction. She's involved in the community for a longest period that I remember. I was MLA from Surrey Panorama in 2009, and then Surrey Cloverdale 2013. And now she's MLA from Surrey South. She's also serving as the opposition caucus chair and critic for gender equity, accessibility, and inclusion. And Stephanie, as you know, also served as a Minister of Children and Family Development, Minister of Social Development, Minister of Community, Sports and Cultural Development, and Minister of Labor, Citizen Services, and Open Government. As you know, Stephanie also worked with the BC Paraplegic Association, now it's called SCIBC, as a Director of Marketing and Development, and was Manager of Accessibility for 2010 Legacies now. So as you know, she's very well involved for a number of years in the community in one form or other. So welcome both of you.
Thanks, CJ.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. So, Trevor, why don't we start with you? Your new MLAs, your first experience, how you like so far?
It's been an interesting one. I think that since I've been elected in October, I've had the good fortune to represent the riding of Surrey White Rock, and we've had some great MLAs come from that area. We've had Tracy Reddy's, and we've had Gordon Hogue, and I really have enjoyed coming into life as an MLA. It's been a fantastic journey, whether it's helping out constituents or whether it's working on initiatives with my partner over here, Stephanie.
So Trevor ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਐਜ਼ ਏ MLA ਦੀ ਜੌਬ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਇੰਜੋਏ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਇਜ਼ ਏ ਨਿਊ MLA. ਕਹਿੰਦਾ I love it, enjoying it and working for the community. And ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਟ੍ਰੇਸੀ ਰੈਡੀਜ਼ ਐਂਡ ਗੋਰਡਨ ਹੋਗ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ MLA ਰਹੇ ਉਸ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਤੋਂ. ਸੋ ਹੀ ਇਜ਼ ਲੁਕਿੰਗ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ ਟੂ ਬੀਇੰਗ ਸਰਵਿੰਗ as a MLA. So Stephanie, how about you? You on these files for a number of years. How's your experience so far working as a opposition with the new NDP government?
Well, it's definitely different working from the opposition side, but we're a few years in now, and I think we've got our feet under us as an opposition, and we're ready to hold the government to account for the promises they've made.
Well, that's good to know. So Stephanie ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਜੇ ਉਹ ਕੰਮ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਕਾਊਂਟੇਬਲ ਬਣਾਵਾਂਗੇ. ਐਂਡ well, let's start with both of you. I will start with you, Trevor, about the vaccination. So they're making every effort, but we are still quite behind with the rest of the world and our counterparts in USA. What do you think? Why we're so behind in a vaccination?
Well, I think, anytime that we're rolling out one of the largest vaccinations in modern day history, and there's always going to be challenges with that. I think what we're hearing, at least from my constituents in Surrey and White Rock, is just some consistency in terms of when people can expect them and who can expect them. And we've had, I believe everybody's intentions on this file have been pure and good, but we've had some challenges, and in terms of when the rollout was done with the phone systems, and it wasn't a great rollout. I'm encouraged to see things have gotten better, but we did have some bumpy days to begin. And I think the biggest thing is making sure that our most vulnerable people right now are getting protected, and that's got to be the priority.
ਸੋ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਇਸ 'ਤੇ ਇੰਨਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਲੱਗ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਸੋ ਇਹਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੰਸਿਸਟੈਂਸੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ ਸੀ, ਪਰ it's getting a little bit better. What are your take, Stephanie, on this issue?
Well, I would agree with Trevor. I mean, I think, we have to recognize that that this is a joint or all parties, all people effort across the country, and the control of how many vaccines we have, and that is really in the hands of the federal government, and it's up to the province to distribute and to plan for and distribute what they get when they've got it. And I think, we saw, like Trevor says, a bit of a bumpy start. Things seem to be improving and getting smoother, which is good. I think it's really important that we focus on making sure that we get the most vulnerable vaccinated first, which is what government looks to be doing, which is good. It's confusing for people who don't understand why some people are being prioritized over others. That's a challenge for government to manage. But hopefully, all going well, it sounds like the majority of us should have a vaccine by summer, and that's a good thing.
ਸੋ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਾਰੇ, ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਬੰਪੀ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਇਹਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੀਗੀ, ਪਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਇਸ 'ਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਲੱਗਣ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰਾਇਓਰਟਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ. ਸੋ ਦੇ ਸੈਡ ਦੈਟ things will get better by summer. So moving on to another question. I heard in the media that Premier John Horgan has been engaged in a 3-year legal battle to deny access to a simple list of files on the computer that should be publicly accessibility through the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Mm-hmm. A fight he recently lost on all fronts. Why he want to hide these from media and public, Trevor?
Well, you shouldn't. And this is a government, and it's not a new government, but this is a government that campaigned very heavily on transparency. And I think that the Premier needs to live up to that commitment, and it's examples like this are showing that he's not prepared to do so. So that is very unfortunate. I think that the public expects better, and quite frankly, I agree. So I think at the end of the day, these are examples of the government needing to be clear with the public, and FOI is an important process of that, especially for media. And that's a large part of how they get information. And when we're seeing some of these high bills that are coming in just for simple requests to get information from a taxpayer-funded computer, I think we all need to do better than that. And I think the Premier can do much better than that, considering that he's campaigned on that.
ਸੋ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਫਾਈਲਸ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੀ ਐਕਸੈਸ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਨੇ ਮੰਗੀ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੁਕੋ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਰਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਟਰਾਂਸਪੇਰੈਂਸੀ 'ਤੇ ਕਿ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਕਲੇਅਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਡਿਕਲੇਅਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਨੂੰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ, ਐਂਡ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਦੇ ਰੈਨ ਔਨ ਦੈਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਮਿਸ. What are your take on this, Stephanie, on the same question?
Well, similarly, I sat in government for better part of 8 years, listening to John Horgan and opposition decrying all sorts of things about how we weren't transparent, FOIs weren't fast enough, and all sorts of things. So for him now to be blocking a very basic request for files is very concerning. The fact that they are choosing to fight this in a legal way is even more distressing than the normal effort to just delay and deny through delay. I think this is really how government starts to show their true colors. They really want to have it both ways. They want transparency from others, but they don't want to be held accountable for their own actions.
ਸੋ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਹੋਰਗਨ ਅਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਪਾਵਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਦੋਂ ਉਹ ਆਲਵੇਜ਼ ਰੌਲਾ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫਰੀडम ਆਫ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਉਹਦੀ ਐਕਸੈਸ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੋ ਇਟਸ ਅ ਟੋਟਲੀ ਰੋਂਗ ਐਂਡ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਇਟਸ when you using a legal process and it's government lawyers are funded by the public. I don't think it passed the smell test, Trevor.
No, it clearly doesn't. And this is a government that has, for the last number of years, been very unsuccessful when they've gone to the courts. And what happens then is that the meter's running. And these are expensive court cases for things that really shouldn't be going that far in terms of a basic freedom of information request. So it's disappointing to see, but like Stephanie says, is that this is a government that's not living up to what they've said before, and I think that's very unfortunate.
ਸੋ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਹ ਲਾਇਰਸ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਟੂ ਬਲੌਕ ਦੈਟ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਕੋਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਗੁੱਡ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟਿਸਿਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਈ ਫਿਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਇਹਦੀ ਛਪਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਕੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਸੋ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਲੈਟਸ ਸਵਿਚ ਅ ਗੀਅਰ ਲਿਟਲ ਬਿਟ and you being a critic for gender equity, accessibility and inclusion, and there was a talk about a pay equity legislation. What do you think that why it's delay process there?
Well, when I first introduced legislation 3.5 years ago, the Premier called it a political stunt. So the NDP has made a lot of noise about how they are the most gender equal party. They've elected 50% women. They put in place a policy to analyze all government decisions through a lens of gender. They've made a lot of statements about what they're going to do. And after calling my bill a political stunt, they committed to the exact same legislation in the election campaign. But now we're 4 months past the election. We're in our second session of the legislature. They have not introduced legislation, and they haven't called my bill for debate. So I think, again, we're seeing true colors. There's a lot of promises being made, not a lot of action.
So Stephanie ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੇ ਐਕੁਇਟੀ ਲੈਜਿਸਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਿੱਲ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਐਂਡ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੈਸੇ ਤਾਂ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ they brag about that they have a 50% women in the government and MLAs and so and ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਿੱਲ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਸਟੰਟ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਨਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਨਾ ਹੀ 2 ਸੈਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਹਾਲੇ ਤੱਕ ਉਸ ਬਿੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਲੇ ਤੱਕ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਵੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ ਫਿਰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਫਿਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਡਬਲ ਸਟੈਂਡਰਡਸ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਦਿਖਦੇ ਆ Trevor, your area is a mental health and addictions, and it's a very during COVID, this area is affected. Lot of youth, lot of people staying at home and causing lot of problems. What is your take on this issue? Being a critic on opposition side.
Well, it's an issue that is paramount to me, not only as a critic, as an MLA, but as a father of 3 kids. I think that we all have to ensure that we are doing as much as possible to provide support for mental health for youth, for everybody. On the topic of youth and mental health, we have a long way to go. And, not to get political about it, it's something that I think is an all hands on deck approach. But, right now, and given that we're in a pandemic, we are completely overstretched, we're underfunded, and we're under-resourced. And unfortunately, our youth are suffering from that, and we are seeing example after example, and some of them are having very, very tragic consequences.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਦਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਕਰਕੇ ਐਂਡ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਯੂਥ, ਐਂਡ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਫਾਦਰ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਮੇਰੇ ਵੀ ਚਿਲਡਰਨ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਏਰੀਆ ਵੈਰੀ ਇਹ ਅੰਡਰ ਫੰਡਡ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਇਸ 'ਤੇ ਅਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਪੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ. And we will come back to that because the fentanyl crisis is like it's alarming in British Columbia. I think we had more deaths, more than even COVID-19, and it's increased year over year, almost over 76%.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that? We'll start with you, and then I will ask Stephanie to comment on that.
Yeah, it's we've been in this pandemic for a number of years, and in 2016 we actually declared it a pandemic and an opioid crisis, and unfortunately in 2020 we saw a record number of overdose deaths. And this is something that I think that people are needing to realize that these are deaths that are happening in every community across the province, and they're happening in our living rooms. They're happening in our homes. They're happening in hotels. They're happening everywhere. It's not just happening on the streets, and it's a problem. And it's a problem that we have to actually not just talk about, but we have to find ways to try and curb it. And there's a lot of things we need to be doing. And Stephanie and I have both talked about those publicly. It's going to be, again, an all hands on deck approach, but we really need the support of this government, the support of the minister responsible, and the support of the premier to get this done. And we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah, so Trevor ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਓਪੀਓਇਡ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈ, ਇਜ਼ ਰੀਅਲੀ ਅ ਬਿਗ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ, ਐਂਡ ਇਸ 'ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ 'ਤੇ ਅਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਪੇ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, ਐਂਡ ਦੈਨ ਵੀ ਕੈਨ ਵਰਕ ਔਨ ਦਿਸ ਫਾਈਲ ਟੁਗੈਦਰ ਟੂ ਮੇਕ ਇਟ ਬੈਟਰ. So Stephanie, what do you think about this same issue, that it's not a one community or another community, it's all over, all British Columbia, and especially lower mainland is the biggest challenge?
Well, it is. And of course, anytime you're talking about drugs and illicit drugs, there's a stigma attached to that. And there are people have belief systems about that, about who those people are and what they look like and so on. And frankly, government is kind of exacerbating that problem when the supports that they're putting in place and the actions that they're taking are focused on a very small population of people who are street entrenched, very challenged, but that is not where the majority of deaths are happening. The majority of deaths are happening in living rooms in suburbs. And that's, I think, the challenge at really getting at this epidemic, is recognizing that this isn't a problem for some people over there. This is a problem for all of us in our communities. And frankly, we probably all know someone, although we might not know that we do, that's struggling with this addiction right now. And we have to take a different approach. And we have a government that has put in place a minister of mental health and addictions, a special ministry devoted to these issues, but their budget is smaller than the office of the premier. So we have to be really questioning, what are they doing? We've seen this week Trevor asking in the House about the closure of treatment centers. And the minister shakes her head and says, oh, well, it's not my decision. It was somebody else's decision. It's not my fault. Well, we can't have that right now. We can't have centers closing. We can't have a minister that won't take responsibility and step in. But that's what we're faced with. And what we're saying as opposition is, again, this is a problem. Everybody recognizes it as a problem. We're not going to stand up and say, don't spend money on this. This is somewhere we need to be spending money. And we all have to be willing to talk about it and willing to help in our communities. And certainly Trevor and I are.
ਸੋ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਓਪੀਐਡ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਟਰੀਟਸ ਤੇ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਾਂ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਡਾਊਨਟਾਊਨ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਬਾਕੀ ਆਮ ਬੈੱਡਰੂਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਘਰ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਦੀ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਲੋਕੀ ਮਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਸੇ ਤਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਦੀ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰੀ ਬਣਾਈ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਜਟ ਹੈ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਦੇ ਸਟਾਫ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਵੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਬਜਟ ਘੱਟ ਹੈ, ਅਤੇ ਕਈ ਟਰੀਟਮੈਂਟ ਸੈਂਟਰਸ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਲੋਜ਼ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਕਲੋਜ਼ ਹੋਣ ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ ਓਪਨ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਆ। So we're talking to today Trevor Halford and Stephanie Cadieux, both are MLA from Surrey South and Surrey White Rock. My phone lines are open. If you have any question for Trevor or for Stephanie, please feel free to call us and they will be able to answer your questions. So coming back to the same issue, Trevor, of the addiction and opioid crisis. And so last week I have a Sonia Furstno, leader of BC Green Party, at my show like you guys are today, and she was saying that a small portion of drugs, any drug, should be legalized. What are your parties and your guys' take on this?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one approach, and from the way that I've kind of looked at this, it's kind of an all pillar approach, right? When we're talking about whether it's decriminalization, whether it's prevention, safe supply, and recovery, and it needs to be approached from all those levels. There's not just one fix to this. That's not it. It's got to be something where we are attacking it at all fronts. And again, today it's disappointing, but what I'm talking about today is the fact that this government has closed 4 recovery houses. And that to me is absolutely alarming. So, the government can talk about, decriminalization. They can talk about, how they're piecemealing some resources across the province. But at the end of the day, when they're asking us to do more, they're actually closing recovery centers. And to me, that is a signal that this government does not have a plan to address this crisis.
ਸੋ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਲਾਸਟ ਵੀਕ ਮੇਰੇ ਸ਼ੋਅ 'ਤੇ ਸੋਨੀਆ ਆਏ ਸੀਗੇ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਲੀਡਰ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਮਾਲ ਪੋਰਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਰੱਗਸ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਡੀਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸੀ। ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਆਈ ਐਗਰੀ ਵਿਦ ਦੈਟ, ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਟੈਪਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈ ਰਹੀ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈ 4 ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਿਕਵਰੀ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਲੋਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਰਾਦਰ ਦੈਨ ਕਲੋਜ਼ਿੰਗ ਦੋਜ਼ ਸੈਂਟਰਸ ਐਡਰੈਸਿੰਗ ਦੈਟ ਇਸ਼ੂ, ਇਹ ਕਾਫੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਾਜ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਸਟੈਫਨੀ, what is your take on that same issue?
Very similar to Trevor. This is an issue that takes a multi-pronged approach to solving, and it's not simple. Everybody would like for there to be a simple solution. Do this and the problem will be over. It is not going to be like that, and we have to be realistic. We have to use every tool in the toolbox, as the Premier would say, to deal with this issue, just like we do with other complex issues. And I think we have to recognize that drug addiction has a base in something, and often that's trauma and mental health issues. And we have to be looking at, well, if we're not also looking at solutions to providing supports for people for those issues, then we're not going to solve the problem on the other end with the addiction as well. So I think it's a whole of government solution. The medical system has to look at this differently. The court system has to look at this differently. How we deal with the gangs and that has to be done differently, because it's going to take a lot to get this under control. But it's so important.
So we have a caller online. Let's take a call. Hanji caller, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਾਈਨ ਤੇ ਹੋ? Hello, you're online caller.
ਹਾਂਜੀ, ਮੇਰਾ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਯਾਰ ਰਾਈਟ, ਮੇਰੀ ਅਪਾਇੰਟਮੈਂਟ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਫਰੇਜ਼ਰ ਹਸਪਤਾਲ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਬੁੱਕ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਦੀ, ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਦੀ। ਮੈਂ 56 ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਫਸਟ ਪ੍ਰਾਇਓਰਿਟੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਆ, ਪਰ ਮੇਰੀ ਜ਼ਿਲ੍ਹੇ ਮੈਂ ਗਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੀ ਕੈਂਸਲ ਕਰਤੀ, ਮੇਰੀ ਕੋਈ ਸੁਣਵਾਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਈ।
ਅੱਛਾ, ਫਿਰ ਇਹ ਬੁੱਕ ਕਰਕੇ ਕੈਂਸਲ ਕਰਦੀ ਸੀ ਜੀ?
ਹਾਂ, ਮੈਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਗਿਆ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਰਸ ਸੀ, ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਤੂੰ 56 ਈਅਰ ਓਲਡ ਆ ਬਈ ਤੇਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਈ। ਚਲ ਮੈਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਛ ਉਹਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਰੈਕਡ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਮਿਊਨ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਵੀ ਰੋਕੋ, ਮੇਰੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕੈਂਸਰ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਾਈਟ, ਸਾਰਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਇਮਿਊਨ मैं डॉक्टर ने कहा भी पहला मेरी मम्मा जो वैक्सीनेशन मिलनी मेरी अपॉइंटमेंट बुक करके इन्होंने मैंने उत्थों मोड़िया मुड़ के मेरी कोई सुनवाई नहीं हो रही
Okay,
मैंने
मैं
कल पता नहीं अप्रैल मिलनी जब मेरी पहला अपॉइंटमेंट कल बुक की थी
I will ask MLA's question. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the caller called and he said he have pre-existing condition recovering from a cancer, and so his for vaccination the date was booked, and then it was cancelled, and nobody gave him a reason. So what do you, Trevor, start with you?
Well, that first of all, that's for somebody that's dealing with what your caller was dealing with, that's the last thing they need. So that's unfortunate to hear. I hope that error gets corrected immediately, and I'd ask him if he needs any assistance to contact my office or MLA Cadieux's office, and we'll make sure that we can work with the health minister to try and get that rectified.
Stephanie, for the same question.
Yeah, nothing to add there, CJ. That Trevor's covered it.
Yeah. So ਆਪਣੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਦੋਨੇ MLAs ਦਾ ਕਾਲਰ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਆਫਿਸ 'ਚ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛੋ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਫਿਰ ਹੈਲਥ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਣਗੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਪਾਇੰਟਮੈਂਟ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਾਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਕੈਂਸਲ ਕੀਤੀ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਨੇ ਆਪਦਾ ਸਟੇਟਮੈਂਟ ਓਪੀਅਡ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਫੇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ, ਇਟਸ ਅ ਬਿਗ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ, ਡਰੱਗਸ, ਗੈਂਗਸ, ਇਹ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਨਵੋਲਵਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਮਲਟੀ ਫੈਸਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਸਿੰਪਲ ਬੈਂਡ-ਏਡ ਸੋਲੂਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਾ। ਇਹਦੇ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਦਾ ਸੋਲੂਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੱਢਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ। So let's switch a little bit of gear here. Stephanie, you are also responsible for accessibility critique, and there is accessibility legislation, and that legislation is also delayed. What do you will say about that?
Yes, well, certainly, CJ, everybody who knows me will know this is a passion area for me and always has been. Since before my time in politics, I was an advocate for people with disabilities, so this is not a stretch for me. Accessibility legislation is something that's been talked about for some time. Back in 2014, our government put in place a plan called Accessibility 2024. Which had a bunch of building blocks of things that government needed to do to improve the lives and outcomes for people with disabilities in our province, including in that was legislation. But there was a plan to wait until the federal legislation had passed, which it did in 2019, and then institute something in BC to complement that federal legislation. To their credit, the other parties, both the Green Party and the NDP, committed to the same, and the NDP have initiated back when they took office a rather large consultation across the province about this, and they promised that legislation would be in the House last fall. We're still waiting. Again, we are now in our second session after the election, and the legislation isn't there. We have an incredibly light legislative schedule right now in the legislature. There's plenty of time for this to be brought to the floor, but we're still waiting. I am cautiously optimistic that they might still do this spring. It's really important for people with disabilities. There are things we need to do as a province to move forward to make sure that people with disabilities are fully included in our province, and things we can need to do to make sure that our public spaces are accessible, that we are making sure that people are welcome in businesses of all types in our province, and so that people can fully exercise their rights as citizens, and that includes the ability to go and get a job or to participate in aspects of society. So there's work to be done. There's a reason the legislation is coming forward. And I'm hopeful that they'll do it this spring.
So ਮੈਂ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਕਸੈਸਿਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਲੈਜਿਸਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਲੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ, ਐਂਡ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਆਲਵੇਜ਼ ਪੈਸ਼ਨੇਟ ਆ ਇਸ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ even before entering the politics. So she was always involved, as I told you guys in her introduction, or one way or the other. So federal government ਨੇ 2019 legislation ਪਾਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ, ਸੋ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੰਪਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਐਂਡ ਸਰਟਨ ਉਸ 'ਚ ਇੰਪਰੂਵਮੈਂਟਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੀਪਲ ਵਿਦ ਡਿਸੇਬਿਲਿਟੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਈਜ਼ੀ ਐਕਸੈਸ ਹੋਵੇ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਪਲੇਸਿਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਪਲੇਸਿਸ ਹੈ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਜਾ ਸਕਣ ਅਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਸਕਣ. Any comment by you, Trevor, on the same issue?
No, I think that Stephanie covered it off well. I will just say that there's never a wrong time to do the right thing, and no matter whose idea it is. And I've seen firsthand the amount of work that Stephanie has put into this, and I've seen the results from that work, and I've seen how there is a large number. I think it's over 6 million Canadians live with a disability, and I think that we must remember that that's a huge amount of our society and our neighbors and our relatives and our friends. And I absolutely applaud and support the work that MLA Cadieux has done, and I sit here in Victoria. There's a lot that we can be doing, and there's no reason not to get it done. This is something that we all agree on, and so why wait?
So ਆਪਣੇ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਕੈਡਿਊ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਦੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਹੈਵੀਲੀ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਆ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ, ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਂ 100% ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਦਾ ਹਾਂ, ਅਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਲੋਕ ਹੈ, ਨੇਬਰਸ ਹੈ, ਫਰੈਂਡਸ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਐਕਸੈਸਿਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ. ਐਂਡ ਹੀ 100% ਸਪੋਰਟਸ Stephanie Cadieux's efforts to make sure that this happens. Let's move on, and there's a lot of issues to cover, guys, in 1 hour. So housing, Trevor, thinking about South Surrey, White Rock area, and it's through the roof lately. And what do you think about that? And it's getting out of hand for young people working, if they are working even a minimum wage $15, and affordability is getting out of control.
Yeah, and for it's kind of interesting for a government that campaigned in 2017 on affordability, and they focused on housing. Anything that they've put in place has not worked, and in fact it's done the exact opposite. So I don't know where the premier is getting his advice on housing, but he probably needs to start listening to somebody else. At the end of the day, where we reside in our neighborhoods, yes, the housing prices are up, and affordability is definitely a challenge. And I will say that we need to make sure that we are doing more to have just not only affordable housing, but affordable rental housing. And that is something. I've got a large population of seniors in my neighborhood, and a lot of them are renting. And we need to make sure that we are focused on support for them, and we also need to make sure that we are focused on support for homeowners. And I think that for a lot of people, the equity in their home is actually their pensions, and we need to make sure that we are looking at ways to support all people. And I think that this government has missed its mark for homeowners, and it's actually missed its mark for renters. If you talk to a lot of people that rent.
So Trevor ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਾਊਸਿਸ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਹੈ ਗੋਇੰਗ ਥਰੂ ਦਾ ਰੂਫ, ਐਂਡ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਦੇ ਕੰਪੇਨ ਇਨ ਦਾ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਇਨ 2017 ਐਂਡ ਅਗੇਨ 2020, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਰੌਲਾ ਪਾਇਆ ਸੀ, ਬਟ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਡੂਇੰਗ ਨਥਿੰਗ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਇਟ. ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਰੈਂਟਲਸ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਬਿਗ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦੀ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਦੇਰ ਇਜ਼ ਅ ਲੋਟ ਆਫ ਸੀਨੀਅਰਸ ਲਿਵ on a rental basis, so it's a big challenge. What do you think about the same issue, Stephanie?
Yeah, well, I have a number of thoughts. First off, when you set out to make housing more affordable, you can't do that by adding more taxes. That adds to the price. It doesn't lower it. So certainly, I think the approach of the NDP government on this has been wrong, and I think it's also it was wrong to suggest that it was all sorts of people from other parts of the world coming here and paying too much for our houses. We've proven that that's not what was happening, and we're seeing right now over this last year, a 16% increase in housing prices. And the people that are buying are millennials. They are between 20 and 40 years old. They're buying their first houses. And that we have to recognize that is the market. That is who is competing for these homes, and that's what's happening. And it is challenging for young people. It's challenging for most people, I would say, to get into our market. But and Trevor's points about rentals, it's the same thing. Putting in place caps and things that prevent owners from wanting to rent their homes out limits the supply. It doesn't increase the supply. And while I understand the desire to help protect renters, we have to do it in a way that makes sense and that also expands the market. And if we take this just one other direction, CJ, you'll know this, having just moved into the area here by me, that we are building a lot of homes. 1,500 right now, another 1,500 in the pipeline, and another 7,000 in the plans. Not one of those homes, CJ, is one that I can live in as a person with a disability. Not one that I can visit and have dinner in. That's a problem. And that's one of the things that the accessibility legislation could do, is to start to recognize that we need to be building housing that works for everyone. So that doesn't just mean we need to build condos and townhouses, but we need to build condos and townhouses that are the right size for families in the city of Vancouver or other places. We need to be building single family homes. We need a variety of things for a variety of people. We're not all the same, but we have to make sure that those homes are also homes that people can age in, and that people can visit, and that people with disabilities can buy. So there's a lot of work to be done, and certainly a great desire to do it. But certainly the housing price issue in the Lower Mainland is not going away anytime soon.
No, you're right, Stephanie. The कहना है कि ਜਿਹੜੇ housing prices, the affordability ਦਾ issue is a big issue. ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ not only the prices, but they adding more and more taxes, and the prices are increasing. ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ accessibility ਨਹੀਂ. That's a very interesting point, Stephanie. I seen all those new houses, the one I live in. Like, you have to ride like few stairs to get to the main area. People with the disabilities, I don't think that was even attention paid to that part in a house building. Either as a condos maybe, but in a townhouses or single dwellings.
And the challenge there, CJ, is that not everybody with a disability wants to live in a condo. Not everybody is the same. As Trevor mentioned, there's 6 million Canadians with disabilities. In British Columbia, we are nearing 25% of the population reports having some kind of disability that affects their daily life. That's not going to affect everyone as it relates to not being able to manage stairs. But there is a large number of people, and especially as people age, that are going to want to be able to age in their home. And they can't do that if we don't plan ahead.
So ਮੈਂ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਕਸੈਸਿਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਆਫ ਪੀਪਲ ਵਿਦ ਡਿਸੇਬਿਲਿਟੀਜ਼, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਵੇਂ ਘਰ ਬਣ ਰਹੇ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਉਸ 'ਚ ਅਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਪੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ. ਪਲੱਸ ਐਟ ਦ ਸੇਮ ਟਾਈਮ, Trevor and Stephanie, the aging population now. So, no largely different that they want a easy access to their houses. And coming to that point, Trevor, is in both South Surrey, White Rock area, and there is no big supply, especially in White Rock. And I don't know, you work closely with the municipality or city, or you have a conversation with the mayor, like the process there. When I live there and I talk to people, it takes forever City Hall to approve any project. Like, people are waiting 2 to 3 years to get their permit to build. Did you had ever chance to speak to the City Hall about that?
Yeah, I've actually, to be honest, I've enjoyed the relationship that I've developed with Mayor Walker, and he's quite an interesting guy, and I have a lot of time for him, and I think that it's a challenge. And White Rock is a community that's not growing any more space. It's a community where I think that you've had a shift. You've had a lot of development very quickly, and then you had an election where people signaled that they maybe didn't support that. So I think that it's a balance, and you're not going to please everybody. And, I think that there's going to be frustrations. Either you're going too slow or you're going too fast. But, I think that in the issue of, and I did talk to Mayor Walker about rentals, especially rentals for seniors. And I know that he's alive to that. But in terms of the processing times at City Hall, I'll defer that question to when you have Mayor Walker on your show.
Okay, and thank you, Trevor. ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸਿੰਗ ਟਾਈਮ ਇਨ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਇਨ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੋਈ ਘਰ ਬਿਲਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ 2 ਤੋਂ 3 ਸਾਲ ਉਹ ਪਰਮਿਟ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੋਣ 'ਤੇ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਆਈ ਨੋ ਦੈਟ ਦੇਰ ਇਜ਼ ਅ ਲੋਟ ਆਫ ਅਦਰ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਪਰ ਆਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈਗਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਵਾਕਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਟਾਕਿੰਗ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਦਾ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਲ ਰੈਂਟਲ ਪਲੇਸਿਸ ਦੇਅਰ ਸੋ there is a lot of issues. So guys, we have a last 4-5 minutes left. So I will give you both a chance. We start with Stephanie. Your final comments about what are you seeing happening at the legislature and what do you like to see as an outcome?
Well, what we're seeing at the legislature right now is a government that has decided they don't need to answer to the opposition or the public about their plans. They're asking right now for a $13.4 billion check to be written because they can't produce their budget on time. And so normally the process is you see a budget, then interim supply is granted while estimates go on, and there's a process to these things. The government has thrown that process out the window and is changing the law to suit their needs and is looking to keep us in the dark for another month about what they plan to do and what the state of the provincial finances are. So that's really concerning. We know, we worked collaboratively last year because of the pandemic, acknowledging that money needed to be spent. But from the moment that cooperative effort was made, the Greens and us and the NDP have decided to obfuscate and hide things, and that's not what the public deserves. And we're going to continue to fight in Victoria to make sure that we are looking for transparency and answers for British Columbia, and for the government to live up to the promises that they've made to British Columbians. They've made some big promises, and they cannot continue to suggest that the pandemic is a reason to not do any of the things they promised. They have an obligation as government to do what they promised.
So ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਪੈਨਾਡੈਮਿਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਆਪਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਸੀਗਾ ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਮਿਸ ਕੀਤੇ ਆ ਹੁਣ ਬਜਟ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਲੇ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਮੇਕਿੰਗ ਐਕਸਕਿਊਜ਼ਸ ਪਰ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਨਾਟ ਡਿਲੀਵਰਿੰਗ ਔਨ देयर ਪ੍ਰੋਮਿਸਿਸ ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਕਾਊਂਟੇਬਲ ਰੱਖਣਾ Trevor, your final comments.
Yeah, I concur with Stephanie, and I don't think anybody will be surprised by that. But is that this is not a new government. This is they like to use the words previous government. They are the previous government, and I think that for a government that came in on what we call a snap election, but I think if the premier was honest with British Columbians, I think we all know that it's an election he'd been planning for quite a while. But since they've come into power, it hasn't been smooth for them. And what that's resulted in is pain for British Columbians. And when we look at things like the economic recovery grant that people were promised, and we saw that was not effectively rolled out, people are still waiting for that grant. When we see the business recovery grant, right now only 25% of the money has gone out the door. And businesses have actually shut their doors. And they could have used that money. And that's unfortunate. We're seeing the ICBC rebate checks delayed. So everything that government has promised, they've either bungled or they've botched. And this is at a time where people need the support, and they quite frankly are not getting it. So the first 4 months of this government I'm hoping things get better. but I'm not optimistic. And I am sorry that we raise these things, because every time we do, it seems like it's a big inconvenience for the Premier and his cabinet ministers, but that will not stop Stephanie and I, because we've got a job to do, whether they find it inconvenient or not. But we're going to continue to do that, because our constituents and all of British Columbia is owed that. And I think the Premier owes us a little bit more transparency in what he does.
ਸੋ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਬਲੇਮਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਵੀਅਸ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ, ਬਟ ਦੇ ਹੈਡ ਪ੍ਰੀਵੀਅਸ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ, ਸੋ ਉਹ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਬਲੇਮ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ, ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੰਮ ਹੈਗੇ ਡਿਲੇ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ। ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਮੋਲ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਲਪ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕੀਤੀ, ਓਨਲੀ 25% ਡਿਲੀਵਰਡ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਮਿਸਿਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਾਰੇ ਉਹ ਡਿਲੇ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਹੈਲਪ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਰਹੀ। ਐਂਡ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਨ ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਵਿਲ ਮੇਕ ਸ਼ੋਰ hold them accountable for their actions. Both of you, Trevor and Stephanie, thank you for your time, and I will invite you again. It was a very 1 hour is a short period to go through all the issues, but thank you very much, and keep up the good work and keep them accountable.
Thank you, CJ.
So ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਸਰੀ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ ਤੋਂ MLA Trevor Halford and ਸਰੀ ਸਾਊਥ ਸਟੈਫਨੀ ਕੈਡਿਊ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਅਕਾਊਂਟੇਬਲ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ, ਇਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੈਟਿਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਆ। ਕਾਫੀ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਵਰ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਪਰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੇ ਸਮਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਵੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਬਣੀ ਹੈ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਹੋਰਗਨ ਦੀ, ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਲੇ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ, ਅਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੈਜਿਸਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਪਾਸ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ। ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਲੈਜਿਸਲੇਚਰ, ਪਰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਉਂ ਇਹ ਡਿਲੇ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਸੇ ਹੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਜਾਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਸਟ ਨਾਲ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਵਾਚ ਮਾਈ ਸ਼ੋ ਐਂਡ ਗਿਵ ਯੂਰ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦਿਆ ਕਰੋ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਇੰਪਰੂਵ ਕਰ ਸਕੀਏ। ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ, ਧੰਨਵਾਦ। ਹੈਵ ਅ ਵੰਡਰਫੁਲ ਹੈਪੀ ਹੈਲਥੀ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ।